The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off. Yeah, it's a few days after the All-Ireland now, and myself, Shane Stapleton and Michael Verney with me here. We're still picking over the coals after Limerick's unbelievable All-Ireland final win. Just a reminder, as I said, brought to you by Bamboo, and actually Grode Hegarty scored his goals with a Bamboo hurley in the All-Ireland final. So talk about that's a fair trajectory that hurley has made as it blasts into the back of the net on the biggest stage of all. Just a reminder to follow us on YouTube. It is free to subscribe. If you hit that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, if you're on YouTube, really helps the channel grow. And also consider joining us on Patreon, the Supporters Club there, €5 a month, and it helps the channel grow and push on into the future. Michael Verney, how are you?
I'm good. If Grode Hegarty is using the Bamboo, I think I'd nearly try it myself, to be honest with you, because I've already had a failed hurling career so far, so I might as well make the move now, and I might be able to, get another couple of years if I can strike the ball an extra 10 or 15 yards.
Sure, there's two of us in it when it comes to failed hurling careers, isn't there?
That's a fact, yeah.
We'll do our hurling on the ditch, and we'll do our talking on the high stool, huh?
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, it's great though. Like, the championship is over, but the Hurling Show will stay going, and obviously we're getting into the club, the cut and thrust to the club championship fairly soon over the next couple of weeks and months. So loads to discuss and loads to digest even after last Sunday, because sometimes it's only when you get to look back at it again and go a little bit deeper that you see, things maybe that you didn't see. And I know we've some interesting stuff to get into on today's show again.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things we're going to do is we're going to pick a live All-Stars team. We don't know what it is. We haven't discussed it beforehand. We're going to pick it live, and your comments coming in will help shape the team also. We're going to look at the latest with the Wexford and the Tipperary jobs. We're going to do a combined Limerick 2021, Kilkenny 2018. So these are supposed to be the high watermarks of both of those teams. Everyone knows how Kilkenny dismantled Waterford in that All-Ireland final. We've seen what Limerick have done this year. So we're going to pick a 15 between them. We will have the pitch map up and all. I'll just show you what it looks like at the moment. So there are the teams, but we're going to have to lose 15 of those players, and we're looking forward to getting stuck into that. We're also going to look at a couple of other things. For example, Declan Hannon was talking about analyst Shawnee O'Donnell and the amount of time he puts into the Limerick team. We'll have a quick chat on that. And then a couple of people, Kenneth McHugh and Rod Clifford, have emailed in talking about how too many hand passes are just throws these days, and actually gave some very interesting statistics. Now, we'll talk about that. And again, we want to get your views in. So plenty of comments are already flying in here. I'll just have a look at them already. P-Well74, who I think is Patrick's Well74. Comparing Kilkenny and Limerick isn't fair until we get to 5 or 6 All-Irelands. If we do, Kilkenny had two great rivalries, Cork and Tipperary. We don't have one yet. Well, that's kind of interesting, because you could argue that between 2006 and 2009, that 4 in a row, other than Cork the first year, did Kilkenny have any really true strong rivalries? Obviously, Tipperary pushed them hard at the other end of that, but it's not like Cork and Tipp the whole way throughout were pushing them throughout that period of time. So maybe there's something similar there.
I'd say it could be something similar when you look at Limerick obviously beating Galway the first year, but they've probably won their 2 All-Irelands comprehensively since then. You'd imagine the gap will close, and there could be a rivalry when they're starting to get towards the end of their run, I'd imagine. Something similar to with Kilkenny. They had a rivalry at the start, obviously that massive Cork rivalry, and then they had a rivalry at the finish as well.
Yeah, we'll see if that's how it pans out. Sean O says, Limerick winners in 2018, 2020 and 21, lost semi-final in 19. Should Limerick not be compared to the Kilkenny team that were winners in 2000, 2002, 2003, lost semi-final in 01? Exact same results. Yeah, but I think it's a bit just people talk about Kilkenny. When they talk about Kilkenny, the 2008 team is the team to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. That's the team everybody talks about, because that's widely acknowledged as the greatest team of them all. Maybe Limerick will surpass them. And that's the interesting thing. You want to see, like, if they played, if you had a combined team at the moment, what would that look like? Would it be more Kilkenny? Would it be more Limerick? We're going to factor in the benches, and we're going to factor in the managers as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what we stumble upon, because I haven't thought about it too much, as in X going up against Y. So it's going to be interesting to see what way it pans out.
And something that I just thought of there, I should have mentioned it earlier in the week, both of them have coaches that have Gaelic football backgrounds. So Mick Dempsey was a huge part of that Kilkenny run for a long time. Paul Kinnerk, a huge run, a part of this Limerick run. So, I mean, what might every hurling coach in hurling intercounty manager be thinking about doing in the next year or two?
Well, but it's one thing getting in somebody with a football background. It's another thing getting in someone with a football background that knows what they're doing and knows how to bring those skills across into hurling. It's like, sometimes managers look for a quick fix and it's like, oh, sure, he did a bit of football or that. It's not, unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. And you also have to have players who take on board what the coach is saying and will be able to implement it as well. So it's not, if it was as easy as that, there'd just be football coaches in every inter-county hurling camp in the country, and they'd all be winning. But that's obviously, it can't be the case.
Yeah, but you know the way people are quite traditionalist when it comes to their hurling, and they're like, what would a footballer know about hurling? And I'm talking about, like, let's say managements or clubs or counties, they're like, getting in a football, man, what are you talking about? Now, Cian O'Neill was involved at Tipperary, so we know that, and he's obviously gone on to be involved with a number of other teams at the top level of inter-county football. But James Horan, he was manager of Turlough for a while. Anthony Cunningham, he's obviously managed at inter-county level in both hurling and football. Pat Gilroy went from being a Gaelic football manager for years to being with hurling. So there's a fair, there's sort of a bit of a track record of this working, our relative success in some areas. So I think that this might make it more palatable for certain hurling diehards to get a Gaelic football person in, because recycling the ball and making sure that the person in the best position uses it is now paramount.
To be honest with you, anybody who would like not take in someone with a football background, it would probably say more about them than anything else, in my opinion. The best managers are usually very, very open-minded to anything that can improve their team. And it's funny that we're talking about this because I understand that Jason Ryan is one of the front runners for the Wexford hurling job at the moment. Don't believe that Derek McGrath is in the equation anymore, or I'm not even sure if he was in the equation at all. But Jason Ryan is definitely one of the front runners, and obviously he's Waterford native. But if he took on the Wexford hurlers, he's involved with Glen Barntown at the moment. He was involved with them last year to beat Martins, knocked them out of the championship in the quarter final, and he's with them again this year. But he would obviously then potentially be the Wexford football boss earlier in his career, obviously, in the Wexford hurling boss. So there's I suppose there's more of them than there was up until Pat Gilroy, probably Anthony Cunningham, and a few more. There weren't I think Sean Boylan was over both, or was involved with both the Meath as well, I think. He
played hurling for Meath for at least 10 years.
Yeah, so there's definitely an increasing kind of trend, but it definitely would be interesting if Jason Ryan was over the Wexford hurlers next year. It'd be something a little different, and particularly if you're a manager now as well. It's a lot about managing people. Like, I'm sure he'd have an expert hurling coach with him as well. So he'd be more managing people. It's not just it's like Pat Gilroy with the Dublin hurlers. It's not just a football man coming in implementing all his principles. He has certain principles, but he's going to bring in experts. Like he had Anthony Cunningham with him that time as well, didn't he? Wasn't Anthony Cunningham? Yeah. So like it's who you surround yourself with as well. Intercounty management is about managing people. It's almost like running a business now. So you can't just say you can't have a football man in charge. That just doesn't wash anymore.
And are there any two sports in the world that are as similar as these two because of the size of the pitch, the physicality involved, the fact that it's a 360-degree sport? Rugby is to some degree, but generally you're facing forward at all times, for example, whereas in Gaelic football and hurling, there is no offside. Like a full back often gets isolated. You have runners up through the middle, all of that kind of stuff. Like football is always tactically a few years ahead of hurling, I would say. And that's why I think footballers come in, so people with football backgrounds come in and they have success, because hurling is trending in that direction now. So if no better place to get an edge than people that have tactically been trying to get every square inch out of the same type of field for years beforehand.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. And it does look like they're a couple of years ahead. And trends that we've seen in football maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we now start to see them in hurling. Even like, basketball trends that we would have been seeing in Gaelic football 4 or 5 years ago are now becoming more prevalent in hurling. It just takes a little bit longer for them to transfer over. I'm not too sure if that's because it's such an old game and such a traditional game that maybe the changes don't happen maybe as quickly as they do in Gaelic football. But there's definitely obvious football trends being carried across into hurling, and I suppose Paul Kinnerk is obviously one of the big drivers of that as well, given his football background with Limerick as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll just go through a few more questions, or a few more comments, I should say. Isaac Dolan, Lynch is the only player guaranteed to get into the Kilkenny team. So he's obviously talking about Cian Lynch and referencing the 2008 Kilkenny team. Comments flying in here. Lads, will anything be done about the handbags for next year? So I think the semi-final was interesting at the start. Cork and Kilkenny players falling around the middle of the field before the start of the game, getting stuck into each other. Will that be done? I doubt it.
Yeah, I had a row with my uncle there last week. He was saying that like when people come in subs and they hit someone on the shoulder, that they should be given a yellow card or something like that. And I had to leave the house. I was just like, there'll be no contact in hurling if that sort of stuff is kind of outlawed. I love the crack at the throw-in. It's just so much nervous tension and enthusiasm on both sides. Like I love that. I don't think it's in any way dirty or anything like that. It's part of the game. Now, things like the Cian Lynch hip toss and stuff like that will have to be looked at a lot closer, obviously. But I've no issue with lads, as Ger Canning said, a bit of how's your father, like with shoulders and pull it like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If we're trying to get rid of that, I think we're trying to sanitize the game way too much. We all love that. The crowd is buzzing for something like that. It's in no way dirty or anything like that. No one's going to get hurt. It's just lads pulling and dragging out of each other and just looking to get a bit of nervous tension out before the ball is thrown in. And Fergal Horgan actually accommodated by leaving it for about 30 seconds, and it was just like a drama, and it just kept going on and on. It's brilliant, and I just love at throw-in how everybody just starts gravitating so close to the ball. Like I remember a referee got clipped on a throw-in one time, didn't he? Because he was actually too close. The players had kind of come in on top of him, and all like it's a new thing only in recent years that the linesmen will come in to try and keep the players back at the 65s, because everybody just starts falling in on top of it, because it's just everybody just wants to get on the ball or have a play at the start and get themselves into the game.
You need that mayhem. I don't want the game sanitized within an inch of its life. It is the way it is. Like, let people get stuck into each other. Nobody wants, any dirty strokes or anything like that. And that should always be clamped down on. And maybe some people would say that the more of this messing that's going on, the more likely you are to have a dirty stroke pulled. But in general, I just don't want it to end up like basketball, where you're just shadowing lads and people aren't getting stuck into each other, because that's just the appeal of it. I mean, it's gladiatorial in some ways. Two lads down in a pit and one comes up. And I know I've used that term before, but that is kind of the appeal of it. We're all sort of drawn towards the aggression of it all. And
can I just say something on basketball as well? Basketball is a fairly filthy sport at times. You just don't see it. You just don't see a lot of it. And a lot of what's going on in hurling now is one-to-one stuff that you don't see unless the ball is within that area a lot of the time as well. But I wouldn't be trying to outlaw any of that. Like, and all that is harmless to be honest. It's handbags, as he said, as our viewer said. It's very, very harmless, and it's part of the game.
Yeah, Fergus Butler, I should say, says Cian Lynch, the Harry Potter of hurling, more like the Ron Weasley with the hair. Joe LK20, I can't conclusively put any Cork players on an All-Star 15, not being disingenuous, as Verney would say. Conor Linehan, champions again, ole, ole, ole. Garrod Howley, I know Clare went out early, but aside from Tony Kelly, there's a few lads who should be nominated, really stepped up well. Isaac Dolan, Galway are the only team to keep with Limerick, and if we had a good manager last year, we could have beaten them. I know Shane has to get the Clare and Kilkenny audience back on site, but relax with the whole Malone and Cody business. Obviously, we were talking about them a nice bit in the early All-Stars. Honda Treaty, says Fergus. Conor Linehan, any of my fellow Limerick men getting kind of bored of all this success? Wow.
Oh, Conor, Jenny Mac.
Talk about turning us off you.
Yeah, Jenny Mac. No, like that's you've been starved since 1973, and now you're telling me you're getting bored. Come on, give it a rest.
Yeah, Verney rocking the Tom Morrissey hairstyle.
Yeah, it needs to go a bit longer, I'd say, before then. Unfortunately, Tom can slick his hair back. Mine is curly and does not do that, so I don't think I'll be ever look like Tom Morrissey, or I'll never be hurling like him either.
It cannot be tamed like yourself.
Yeah.
Hurricane, we're losing the skill of pulling on the ball both on the ground and in the air. Too much loose play and throwing the ball. Now, again, we will get to the throwing the ball thing later on, but at this stage, if you're pulling on the ball in the middle of a game, unless it's it's the last resort, I think you're basically turning what's probably going to be good possession into a 50-50 ball. And pulling in the air, it's a low percentage thing to do. I mean, unless it's to score a goal because you're close to goal, I wouldn't really be encouraging players to do it, would you?
I do still like it at times, but again, there's not much control in it unless you're in around the goals and you're getting a flick. There's not.
If you want to lay a marker on the man, let's say you're a centre forward and you want to lay a marker on the centre back, or if he's caught one or two balls, I can see why you might think, well, you know what, I'll sort of soften his cough with this. But in general, in terms of trying to win the game and get on the ball, I don't really see it.
As well as that, Shane, with the way the game has been refereed now, a lot of time if there's noise, hurl on hurl, and you're not making contact with the ball, which a lot of the time you mightn't on a high ball, the referee will actually blow. And the crowd will actually make noise now because it's a younger crowd who are not used to, we'll say obviously that this was off the ball, but the Liam Dunn pull in 96 or pulls like that, high balls, where a lot of younger people aren't used to it now. There'll be noise and the referee will nearly be forced to make a decision or give a call. Maybe that's, 10 years ago would have been alien. It was just, everything was pulled on a high ball. But it is a good way of laying a marker down, and also potentially buying a yard the next time the next ball comes down. If he thinks you're pulling, then all of a sudden the hurl goes back and you might buy yourself a yard for a catch.
Yeah, we're going to pick the All-Stars team for 2021 very shortly. We'll just go through a few more comments. Get your comments in and let us know who should be on the team. And not only that, but why. Because there's going to be a few tough decisions. We do need to kind of have those extra points of why somebody should get in ahead of someone else. In terms of hurling, Pádraig Gill says, please God, no. Football has influenced hurling negatively enough as it is. We don't need any more. I'd like to know from Pádraig what exactly he's talking about when he references that. Is it the sort of tactical evolution, or what is it? Rory O'Regan, I presume there's no hope of Liam Cahill staying on with the Dacia with the draw of his native county. Who would you see stepping into the hot seat if he departs? Eddie Brennan, question mark. We will be talking about that a little bit more as the show goes on. And let us know, who do you think will Liam Cahill take over in Tipperary? We'll talk about the latest. And who would you like to see take over in Waterford if that is the case? Mike Doyle, I don't think Kilkenny of 08 and this Limerick team should be compared. You wouldn't compare Cork's 4 in a row, Kilkenny's 4 in a row. That Cork team in the 40s that... I think my housemate was telling me that they beat Dublin 3 times in a final, Antrim once in a final. And that was kind of almost his way of saying, how can you compare it then to now? Sylvia M. Ball should be dropped before hand strikes ball, making it clear to be seen, but also the 4-step rule is not enforced at all. Hand passing is becoming throwing the ball. The obsession with micro-managing of fouls has to stop. It's ridiculous. Nonsense that Lynch would be the only player to make the Kilkenny team. Hegarty and Hayes would eat any of those Kilkenny players for breakfast. Different class. Lads, giving a boy a shoulder is no problem at all. Lots more comments coming in and we will display them as the show goes on. But let's get stuck into the All-Star team of 2021, 2015. What am I talking about? So we'll get going on that now. Michael Verney, do you want to start us off inside in the gap, inside in the goals?
Yeah, my thoughts on the keeper have probably changed in recent weeks. And one reason they might have changed is because of, how important possession is now and how important the puckouts are now. And while saving goals and clear goal scoring chances is obviously a massive skill of a goalkeeper, I don't think it's as important as it was. And while we're not maybe used to seeing it as much now, it probably stands out a bit more. But to me, I think that's nearly offset with how good or not your keeper is on the ball. So I think my opinion has changed a small bit as regards who being number one. And I just think as regards consistently and how safe he is in every aspect of the game, I'd probably be plumping for Nicky Quaid if I'm honest. And I just kind of thinking back to, the penalty save against Cork, which potentially turned their season. Really, they could have been 5 down and could have been in trouble. All of a sudden, he made that save, and Limerick were able to push on. Looking at even the point blank save from Jamie Barron, albeit it hit off his head, and just how secure. And safe he looks at nearly all times. Murphy made some brilliant saves, particularly against Cork that day. But I think what
about against Wexford? The stop he made from Rory O'Connor, unbelievable, and that was the changing of the game.
Yeah, that was a brilliant save as well. The more than Nicky Quaid's save against Cork was the changing of that game as well. So I would probably be just about plumping for Nicky Quaid, and obviously he's played more games, and he was secure again in the All-Ireland final. Any couple of shots that came in, just so safe on it. It's Quaid for me, but obviously there has to be a debate on it.
Yeah, Patrick Collins, where does he come in debate? I think Owen Murphy is right there neck and neck with Nicky Quaid. I think Patrick Collins has really kind of come of age this year, which means the first year that he's in the goals. Don't think it always worked for him the first day out. I think there was a couple of nervy moments in the final. Do I blame him for any of the goals? I don't think you can blame him for any of the goals, certainly against Limerick the last day out. Can't think of him making any howler in any game. I know he spilled the ball once or twice the other day, but it's not like he got caught and turned over. Yeah, he made that mistake against Kilkenny where Adrian Mullen maybe would have scored a goal, because I don't think Colin saw him outside him and he had that little spill. But I think he's done very, very well overall, the way he brings the ball out from the back, the way he's always presenting, he's always available. I think he's been really good, but I do believe it, like you, that it is between Quaid and Owen Murphy. But the question I'd ask you is, how much pressure is Nicky Quaid under in the average game? And I mean even to catch a 50-50 high ball, or a high ball when hurleys are swinging around him. How often does he have to do that, considering how... And like, we should really make a point here. I was talking to Adrian Ronan, former Kilkenny hurler, earlier in the week, and he was saying to me that even at their most dominant, Kilkenny in 2008, all they won. They won 9 All-Stars. That was the highest they had ever won. And obviously they battered teams that year. So this notion that Limerick will win 11, 12, 13 seems a little bit, I don't know, it's sort of, there's a recency bias to some degree. Yeah, they were brilliant all year, but I mean, it's not like they were the only lads playing. And also because you're so dominant, like some players are playing on the front foot all the time, with good reason. They're all brilliant players. But I don't think we can necessarily have 11, 12 or 13 Limerick lads here.
No, and just on the Owen Murphy point, you'd say he's already fighting fires, whereas Nicky Quaid is like, Owen Murphy, before a game is thrown in, you'd probably know he's going to have to fight fires. And can I just say, like me and you have both been on the record. Like I think Murphy is the best goalkeeper in the game when he's at his best. But I've no problem saying that. I think he's probably one of the best goalkeepers of all time, particularly when he's at his best as well. But Quaid's distribution is so good. It's so they go along a lot of time, but they go along when they should go along. They go along when openings are created. I think they held on to possession 24 times from puckouts the other day, albeit some of them short. I think the variety of his distribution in the goals is huge. Whereas Murphy, and this is probably because of the way Kilkenny play, Murphy's distribution is a lot more agricultural. Generally, it's a lot longer. And when they were struggling against Cork, a lot of the ball was going long into the full forward line. That's not to say that, like, if that's the instruction, that's the instruction. He's following the plan that his manager has set out. But I'd be just giving the nod to Quaid in my opinion. Just so, and again, I do agree with you. He's not fighting fires like Owen Murphy is, but he's such a safe pair of hands, and he's so good on the ball. Like, they rarely give away the ball from a puck out. It's rarely anything less than a 50-50, whereas a lot of time with Kilkenny, it's a lot more lower percentage. One of the viewers did say there about Alan Nolan. I would have Alan Nolan right in the shout for a nomination, to be honest with you. I thought he was absolutely outstanding this year. Probably is one of his best seasons with Dublin. Some of the saves against Galway, particularly in that first game, I think he got forward even to get a point or two in different games as well. And I thought he was absolutely brilliant. And again, his puckouts were much improved, I think, from previous years too, which you have to factor in. There's so many more factors than just highlight reel saves kind of nowadays with a goalkeeper. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I do think that's the part where we have to decide. Quaid, in terms of the puckouts, and you could argue that he has better targets to hit, though, to be fair. I mean, going to any of that half backline, like the Limerick half backline is bigger than the rugby back row for Ireland. That's one thing. And then the half forward line are probably bigger again, and they're all very mobile. Now, the puckouts do not work without a goalkeeper of that quality being able to marshal the whole thing. So I'm giving him full credit for maximising what he has at his disposal. So he's class. Now, a lot of time he just goes straight to the likes of Barry Nash or Sean Finn or whatever, which is very high percentage stuff. That's not very difficult for a goalkeeper, certainly a guy with his wrist. There's no problem there. But so then, yes, I agree that Murphy, generally, it's more of an agricultural approach. But when he comes out off his goal and solos out 20 or 30 yards out, I think he'd do that a little bit more than Quaid. Quaid probably doesn't have to do it either, to be fair. He plays the sweeper keeper more as well, doesn't he? Yeah. I think he's a better... Look, Nicky Quaid is an excellent shot stopper. So when I'm sort of differentiating the two, I'm saying they're both class, but I think that Murphy's a better shot stopper. I think Murphy's a better option off the line, and I think he's made the more spectacular saves this year. So that's why I'd be inclined to give it to Murphy. Now, we'll keep the comments coming in, but
For me, it would have to be Murphy. Pádraig Gill says, goalkeeper always the hardest All-Star selection, unless someone has made an absolute howler. Wouldn't be too critical of the lads here, though. It's Murphy for me. And there's a couple of other comments coming in as well. Nicky
I do think it's a 50-50 call, Shane. Like it is like a 50-50 call. And I will say this, that I'd be surprised on the All-Star team if Owen Murphy doesn't get it, because this is just my opinion, because I think they'll be looking to take All-Stars away from Limerick where possible. That's just my own opinion. Like if you look at last year where Limerick were totally dominant, never lost a game through 2020, they got 8 All-Stars. You know, people saying, and like it's an easy thing to say, give the 15 to Limerick, or like which Limerick player will not get an All-Star. But like history would suggest that like you'd be surprised if they got 10. Like it would be a record if they got 10.
Yeah. And Isaac Dolan says, it's like comparing a firefighter from Australia and the North Pole. Murphy has a lot more to do and can pull it off. Look, I actually do believe, like I know what you're saying, I do agree with you to some degree that there will be an element of we're going to try and get some non-Limerick players into this All-Star team because it's going to be dominated by Green. But I think in this case, that while I'm saying Nicky Quaid is brilliant and most years would definitely win the All-Star here, I do think it's Owen Murphy. So there's going to be a couple of split decisions here, but I'm pushing hard for Murphy. Yeah,
the one thing I'd say on that is, I'd say if you went back through their 4 championship games, did Quaid have 8, 9 saves to make, I'd say, over the 4 games? And I'm talking about, like, you know, the Ozzie Gleeson shots in the semi-final, shots, goal chances that maybe weren't really goal chances, whereas Murphy pulled off some absolute point-blank saves. I do think higher stock needs to be, you know, given to the puck-outs and the distribution. But as I think Owen Murphy is one of the best goalkeepers of all time. So I'm okay. I'll go with that. I lean towards Murphy.
Okay, we've got Murphy inside in the gap here. Let us know if you agree, disagree. I mean, comments are already flying in. We'll try and get to as many of them as we can. We'll move into cornerback now. Will I just type the name in and less of the messing?
Can I just say it quickly now, because this is going to be ropey now, particularly when you get to the full-back spot. Yeah. Are we picking 2 cornerbacks and a fullback?
We're picking 2 cornerbacks and a fullback. I've taken the liberty of picking Sean Finn already. So, for example, here we're not going to do anything like picking Barry Nash fullback or Dan Morrissey cornerback, for example. Now, you actually could make a case of, because it's often 2-man fullback line, so you could make a case for picking just 3 guys who played closest to goal that were very good. But we all kind of know the slight difference between the lad who generally guards the square versus the guy who generally marks the faster lad out in the corner. So just by virtue of Sean Finn marking Jack O'Connor at the start of the game, I'm taking it that Sean Finn playing cornerback. But I do accept anyone who says that, well, it's not quite as simple as that. So, you know, there is that.
Yeah, like Sean Finn, outside of, I wouldn't even say Kingston burned him because he was still close enough to get his hurling around him. But outside of that, you know, he was very, very solid again the other day. A ball came in and was just...
Well, 1-2 was scored off him early in the game.
Yeah, early in the game, yeah. I was actually...
Well, it doesn't matter when it was scored. It was scored off him.
But I'm just saying, like, thereafter, like, he was dominant for 55 minutes of the game. Yeah, there was a ball came in on the edge of the square. There was 2 of them up. And he actually just put his hurl up like that and knocked it down to himself and came out with it. You're just thinking, this lad is like... It's almost like way too relaxed to be a cornerback, way too good to be a cornerback. And I mean that as a compliment. He's too good and too comfortable on the ball nearly to be a cornerback. But yeah, like to me, he's by far the most obvious choice at number 2, without a doubt. Like he just, while he might have had a couple of stages in games where he might have been under a small bit of pressure, he's just so good. And he sets up, unlike maybe lots of other cornerbacks, he's the start or the fulcrum of an attack at cornerback, and we've never said that before. Yeah. So it'd be anything other than 4 All-Stars in a row would be a massive surprise. I think he's only 25, so the chances of him picking up more are you know, huge.
Yeah, they might as well just have them handed out to him for 2022, 23, 24 at this stage.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised what might happen. You never know. Paul Murphy got 4 All-Stars in a row, and then had a bit of turbulence. They were beaten in what 13. No, he didn't have 4 in a row. He had 4 in 5 years. You just don't know, and he never got one after that. Then, so you just don't know. Form, injuries, different things. You don't know.
Yeah, unfair to be calling out Paul Murphy like that, but fair enough. Yeah, you've made your point. I'm only joking, and he knows, and know I'm joking too. Fullback, so we have Grode Howley bringing in a comment here saying that Hugh Lawler is fullback for him. Also adds in that he'd like Niall O'Leary and Sean Finn in the two corners. John O'Sullivan adds that Quaid is criminally underrated. I certainly don't think we're underrated.
I don't think he's underrated. I think we fully rate him. But
yeah. Isaac Dolan is one of many pushing for Morrissey to be full back here. All Limerick backs, Barry Nash, very underrated. So lots of comments like that. Lawler roasted in the semi-finals. That was obviously against Patrick Horgan. Dan Morrissey has to be, says Hugh Walsh. As far as I'm concerned, it's Conor Prunty. The reason I'd say that now, and I'm sure plenty of comments will come in, please do get them in and let me know why I'm wrong if you think I am. I would say it's got to be Conor Prunty because of the level of difficulty he's up against compared to Dan Morrissey. So a high ball comes in for Dan Morrissey, which is basically all that Limerick or Cork were able to manage against him for most of that game. A high ball was going in with Diarmaid Byrnes and Declan Hannon sitting in front with Barry Nash not too far away. And this is down to the brilliance of Limerick, right? So don't take it as an insult of Limerick. But what Cork were reduced to was hitting high ball into 4-on-2, 3-on-1, 4v3, balls that are for a back anyway. You know, like a high ball that's travelling 80 yards is a back's ball all day. I mean, that goes without saying, Michael, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So a couple of times Morrissey went up and he caught one beautiful one out towards the right sideline, the Hogan stand sideline. That was absolutely class. But when you know you've so much support around you and you're good in the air and you're a big boy like he is, you can really attack that ball. Whereas in a forward in that situation, it's hanging and you know you have a lad coming behind you to cream you. It's a very low percentage. So I think he's got such, and I mean this in a positive way, he's got stabilizers on the bicycle all around him. So how often was he left exposed one-on-one? Whereas Conor Prunty, I mean, I looked up against Galway a few times and there was 40 yards in front of him and it was probably Shane McNulty. Maybe they were doing a 2v2 in the backline because Shane Bennett at centre-back had gone all the way out to the 65 pressing up on Galway. And like the job he did on the likes of Joe Canning, the job he's done in many big days, even against Aaron Gillan, who got a few scores in the semi-final. I mean, Waterford were up against what the likes of Rob Downey were up against the other day. So that's why degree of difficulty, it's not even a question to me. It's Conor Prunty.
Yeah, to me, Dan Morrissey, like him coming in against Tipp, probably turned things around an awful lot. As you say, such a safe pair of hands for a guy who, like much like JJ Delaney, had done nearly all his hurling at wing back and comes in full back. Just such a seamless transition. But there was never, as you said, there was never those acres of spaces left in front of him. To me, why I give it to Conor Prunty is, like, I think a lot of the time he was in kamikaze situations where there was like 40 or 50 yards in front of him and it was just like, you have to win this ball. If you don't win this ball, your team are goosed. And so many times he was able to win that ball, particularly against Galway. I thought, like, after the first 10 minutes against Tipp, I thought he had Shamie Callanan's number big time. Again, there were one-on-one battles, just the two of them going for the ball. Same with Gillan as well. You know, I saw Prunty rated very lowly in one paper in that game against Limerick. And to me, Conor Prunty was minimum an 8 against Limerick that day. And I thought he snuffed out Gillan. Yeah, fair enough. Gillan turned him inside that lovely Peter Casey pass at one stage, and the goal was put in a play for Gillan. Outside of that, I thought Prunty was outstanding that day. And I said about maybe about Owen Murphy as well. He was fighting fires, and by Jays, he fought them absolutely valiantly. And this is the guy who missed the game against Clare. And look at how badly he was missed against Clare, and he was brilliant thereafter. And just on that as well, him and Morrissey both missed time. But Morrissey missed probably more time than Prunty, I would say. So he came on very late against Cork. He came on after 30 minutes against. He came on after 30 minutes against Tipperary. Prunty missed the first game and played every minute thereafter. It's definitely, we've both always said we're big fans of Conor Prunty. That's not to say I hugely admire what Dan Morrissey's done at full back, but it's Prunty for me. I just thought he had more difficult tasks and was exposed several times. Exposed in the sense that it looked like he could be exposed, but he didn't allow himself to be.
Yeah, which is very good going. And just some of the comments flying in here, there are loads of them. Isaac Dolan talked about him having worse players around him. And obviously they're on the back foot a lot. Hugh Walsh says that Morrissey can't be punished for making it look easy. Mark Corcoran adds 2 goals in a minute for Callanan against Prunty. Tipp should have had more in the second half. Prunty didn't look too hot for them. Clare should have had more goals. Galway got three goals. I don't think he was playing against Clare. And the first goal that Callanan scored, not really sure what Prunty can do there. He has to go to his man, which meant that Callanan was free. Every fullback in the world, or who's ever played hurling and Gaelic football, knows what that's like. You have to go to the man eventually at some point. The second goal, yeah, he did get caught under the ball and Callanan slipped him lovely. These things happen. You're isolated on your own against one of the greatest hurlers of all time. Now and again, a mistake is going to happen. So Dan Morrissey...
He got Jamie Callanan taken off that day, essentially, didn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, Callanan wasn't right. We know that. I mean, he's carrying injury there the whole time, but on his back. But I still think Prunty's done so much at such a high difficulty level over the course of the year that I think we're going to put him in full back there. Dan Morrissey is the people's all-star, says Flash. Morrissey was brilliant, but Lawler really impressed me. What do you think about Lawler?
Yeah, I thought Lawler was brilliant probably before they played Cork and was maybe in pole position before they played Cork, but Patrick Horgan did give him a lot. I think he ended up with 6 from play over the course of extra time, and maybe a couple of them were not necessarily directly off Lawler, but Hugh Lawler is improving again, and Kilkenny are going to need someone like him to continue improving at the spine of their defence. But he probably will get he'll get a nomination, all right. But it's either Morrissey or Prunty, and I think we've picked the right man here. I think he fought an awful lot of fires for Waterford, and he was going up against like Joe Canning, Aaron Gillan, Shamie Callanan, and he got the best of them all. So yeah, it's Prunty for me.
Yeah. Okay, so that's how the team is shaping up so far. Keep your comments coming in. Let us know how right or wrong we are. Porrick Gill, you could use this argument to give no Limerick player an all-star, that they were only so good because of the players around them. Wise up, Dan Morrissey all day. So obviously not everyone is going to agree on that point. And Finn Prunty Nash for me, says Patrick Hickey, Clare man there. Rob Downey should be in over Prunty. So Rob Downey, what do you think? I mean, he did have a good season, but he played all right. He did play pretty well in the final and won a few balls against the head. He was brilliant in the Kilkenny game as that went on. He'd obviously only worked his way into the team, starting against Dublin, did quite well that day. So, I mean, certainly would rate him highly. It's just, there's very stiff competition.
Yeah, he was brilliant probably from the 40th minute onwards, I'd say, against Kilkenny. But it was very almost like Joey Holden in 2016. There was just that much space in front of Seamus Flanagan. There was very little that he could do, and it was, it wasn't he tried as hard as he could, but you are under awful pressure there, and there just wasn't enough of a defensive plan to protect their full back line, and they were just badly exposed. So to me, Downey falls out, I reckon. I still would have had Morrissey and Prunty both ahead of him heading into last Sunday. And nothing that happened last Sunday would suggest that he's jumped into the equation, to me anyway.
Yeah. Conor Leahy, lads, if you think Prunty played better than Morrissey, then call it off. Hugh Walsh, us Limerick fans are very unbiased because every non-Limerick player we watch got minced. Well, to be honest, they kind of did. John O'Sullivan, Evan Ahern, I think the Cork All-Stars should be Mahoney, O'Connor and Horgan. We'll get to that a little bit later on. No Corkman in the full backline can get an All-Star after Sunday. Horror show. But I think then you could argue that nobody further out the field for Cork can get an All-Star because they left the full backline thrown to the Wolves. Yeah,
no, I'd agree with that as well. Listen, it's going to be interesting to see whether we have a Cork man or whether we have a couple of Cork men and how much stock is placed on the final. There obviously should be a lot of stock, but we'd see whether there's too much stock placed on the final as well.
Okay, let's talk about the cornerback spot. The guys that we'd probably be looking to talk about here, Sean O'Donoghue, Niall O'Leary, of course, you'd be looking at, I think Barry Nash is probably number one in this conversation. Is there anyone else you'd look at? Ian Kenny and Shane McNulty, they got into the semi-final with
Rory Hayes.
Rory Hayes, of course, has been very good all year. You could make a case, like Paul Flanagan had a couple of good games as well. He was very good against Tipperary, for example. Darren Morrissey, I think, had a decent season for Galway overall. Even trying to think, Tipperary, Cahill Barrett was good as ever he is.
Yeah, Matt Barrett will get a nomination anyway, at least, I'd say.
Paddy Smith was excellent for Dublin. I mean, he handled TJ Reid very well, especially when they were down so many men in that Leinster final. So he can't be ignored. Owen O'Donnell without injury. And Cian O'Callaghan was very good. The Dublin full backline is generally filled with very good hurlers. It's probably at the other end of the field where they're shy one or two.
Yeah, it's a pity with regards to the full back conversation as well that that we didn't get to see more of Owen O'Donnell, because the bit we saw of him was, brilliant against Galway. It's just a pity that we didn't get to see more of him, because I'm sure he would have come into the conversation there. But if we're talking about, like, we talked about Quaid being underrated, we talk about Dan Morrissey being underrated. Barry Nash is probably the most underrated of them all, I would say. And to me, like, since he slipped in cornerback, fair enough, there's been maybe against Clare last year, he was maybe caught under a high ball with a bit of naivety and inexperience in that position. But he's hardly put a foot wrong since, and I think he's very strong defensively. I think, like, I don't remember much going wrong defensively last day, apart from maybe giving away a free on Jack O'Connor very early out the sideline. He's strong defensively. He's really,
often the spare man now, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, but he's the spare man offensively for a reason as well, because he's so good on the ball and so comfortable on the ball. And like the triangles that he makes with Hannon and Burns and Hayes at different stages, and with O'Donoghue and O'Donovan midfield. He scored a point obviously the other day before half time as well. His distribution is usually very good. Barry Nash would be in pole position for me now, I have to say. If we're talking about an out-and-out cornerback, Sean O'Donoghue was obviously, highly in the conversation before Sunday, but it's very hard to ignore. Even him, abandoning Gallan for the goal to rush to Flanagan was just, he was kind of chasing shadows for the day, and I feel bad for him, because I've been in that position myself, particularly as a cornerback. Whereas, like, if you make a mistake out the pitch, there's loads of other people who can make up for your mistake. If there's a rush of blood to the head in the full back line, there's no one that can make up for you unless the goalkeeper pulls off a brilliant save. So I think O'Donoghue just falls out of that conversation for me. And I'd probably have Barry Nash would be my leading candidate at the moment anyway, unless you have a compelling argument against him or for somebody else.
I'm trying to remember, did we have Sean O'Donoghue in this team
in
the early All-Star selection? Yeah. Unfortunately, the final, and again, thrown to the wolves, but it was just that early goal that Aaron Gallan got, the mix-up between himself and Rob Downey. It's just so costly. They would have lost anyway. I think he's brilliant, but unfortunately, I can't quite put him in there. And there's a comment in here which kind of sums it all up from Flash. Barry Nash is John Kiely and Paul Kinnerk's Swiss Army knife. I mean, that's a very fair point. Niall O'Leary scored in the last 3 games of the season against Dublin, Kilkenny, and also against Limerick. So he's making an impact. But again, Peter Casey obviously had 5 points scored in 24 minutes. It's hard to kind of stand over that. So John O'Sullivan, Niall O'Leary had a great year, but the final, so it has to be Nash. Cahill Barrett, top tier cornerback, says Porrick Gill, let down by others around him this year. I think O'Donoghue would have got it if they got beat by Kilkenny. Isn't that an interesting point? Because, he was so good the first day out. And, we all know about those situations where your stock rises when you don't actually play in a game.
Yeah, well, like, there could be a couple of players that were not in the All-Star 15 that we made before the final that come into it now as a result of other guys playing poorly in the final. And if you look at it, just if it's say like a graph, Nash and O'Donoghue were quite close going into the final, and I'd say O'Donoghue was just ahead of Nash. All of a sudden, O'Donoghue's under pressure, has probably maybe a 5 out of 10 performance. Barry Nash has his, consummate 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10 performance, and all of a sudden he goes ahead of him. And that I just think he's been 7.5 out of 10 all year. Unbelievably consistent. Might have been even a bit harshly done by last year. He was brilliant last year as well. I think if anything, he's got better again. I think his Munster final performance against Tipp was one of his best performances for Limerick as well. He was just so solid. And I think he's been so solid the whole year. And if we're picking out and out cornerbacks, I think Nash is the one. But as one of the viewers said there, Paddy Deegan at cornerback, who I wasn't maybe sure of at cornerback, I thought he had his moments as well at different stages this year. But I think Barry Nash is the best of a decent bunch.
Yeah, so Keely Baggett says, going on Stapleton way of picking the team, because Limerick are so on top, no Limerick forward will get an All-Star due to the ball coming in. Grode Howley, Shane Clare without so early. Rory Hare is their best back in a long time. Cork management are the main reason that O'Leary and O'Donoghue won't get an All-Star. Embarrassing tactics, says Brian White. I think, look, it's Nash. I've already typed in there. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. So I'm just going to go ahead and agree with you and not make any more fuss about it. He's in there. Now, who are we going at for number 5? I mean, and to some degree, the wing backs, a centre back is going to be picked for centre back. But I think we can pick two wing backs, whether they're left or right. You can make an argument. If you wanted to get both I don't know, let's say right wing back, if you thought Burns and Tim O'Mahony were the two best wing backs, I think we could fit the two of them in. Now, obviously, Kyle Hayes comes into that conversation and a few more. But what do you think here? Who's the first man coming to mind?
Oh, this is a really awkward one because Tim O'Mahony was definitely in pole position heading into the final, but had God, did he feel the weight of the ball 2 or 3 times in the final? I can barely.
He felt the weight of the turf on his head.
Yeah, well, that's true too. Yeah.
It.
And his direct matchup with Hegarty, he was nowhere to be seen when Hegarty got his 2 goals. Actually looking back on it, just to think that the Limerick lads were actually standing in space for their 3 goals. There was barely anybody within touch and distance of them. It's very, very difficult. Dermot, to me, O'Mahony's stock definitely fell in the final. Burns' stock didn't rise a massive amount. So I'm not sure. It's between O'Mahony and Burns for that slot there, but I'm kind of finding it difficult to lean towards Burns, and I'm probably leaning towards O'Mahony, but it's a difficult call.
Again, I've all match programs from throughout the year here, and I'm thinking, who else could you talk about? And maybe look at Antrim there. Owen Campbell did okay. Ryan Mullaney, I remember him getting 3 points one day, I think. Dara Gray had an okay year for Dublin. Pádraig Mannion was an awful lot quieter this year. There's not really anyone standing out from Galway too much. Cahill Lyons, there's definitely some very good moments for Cahill Lyons in there at some points during the year. Kieran Bennett got plenty of scores too. I mean, it'd be easy just to forget what Cahill Lyons did over the course of the year, because Limerick really do find a way to dominate against Limerick. There's no doubt about that. But when Cahill Lyons came up the pitch against Clare the first day out, that more or less kind of changed the game. And I think he did some other positive stuff throughout the year as well. Just trying to think there. Do you think that Cahill Lyons has done enough to be in the conversation? The first day out against Clare, he was very good once he was brought out of full back, because he'd been man marking all day on Tony Kelly. And the fact that they trust him to do that, how did he do against Tipperary? How did he do against Galway? And he scored a couple of points from play against Galway, and then even against Limerick in the semi-final. But look, Limerick won that game at a canter.
Yeah, he's obviously in the conversation, but I don't know if he had enough done going into the final. You'd be hard pressed. I think you'd be hard pressed to give it to him over the 2 lads that we've mentioned, even though he was very, very good at different stages throughout the year. But he wasn't, he was probably number 3 coming into the final in that position. I don't think either of the 2 lads have done enough to fall outside of the top 2. Lyons was good against Limerick at stages. He struggled at other stages. He was good against Tipp, in fairness. He was, as you said, he was good against Clare once he got going near the end. This is a it's a really, really awkward spot. I feel like Tim O'Mahony should be number 5, and then I'm kind of thinking, based on the final and been so quiet in the final, not does he deserve it, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just overcomplicating this, and it just should be Dermot Burns based on the season as a whole.
I think it's Dermot Burns. It has to be the semi-final. Even go back to the Munster game, the first day out. Cork had a bit of joy at times, but he did. I remember him catching the ball late on in the game, and I thought he was setting the tone. I think as the Tipperary game went on, he was setting the tone. He was very good against Waterford in the semi-final. Yeah, I think he's just been too dominant in too many games and rarely exposed. Now I know that Seamus Harnedy got 4 points in the final. I can't remember if they were all on him or if some of them were on him, because he was definitely coming out the field and he was on Burns' side of the field. But I think you'd have to have Burns. Put it like this: who would you rather in your team tomorrow, Burns or Tim O'Mahony? And we've been talking positively enough about Tim O'Mahony all year that people will know that that's not meant as an insult. Yeah, no,
100%. Again, it's like what we said earlier. O'Mahony was just ahead of Burns, in my view, and probably in your view, going into the final. The final, it's not as if we're saying Burns after coming from nowhere to take this All-Star. But I just don't know, and this is nothing to be disingenuous, as I said, to Tim O'Mahony. I just don't know if it can justify putting him in a 5 after the final performance. So it's probably Dermot Burns in the cut and thrust of it.
Yeah. Can we make... We'll talk to the centre-back and then we'll get to the other wing-back in a second. Declan Hannon is the obvious one that stands out here. Mark Coleman, maybe there's a case for him to go in there. Maybe not the final, probably didn't go quite as well. Could you make a case for Shane Bennett? I don't think so because of how the semi-final went. looking at John Conlon, had a pretty decent year for Clare. Whether it would amount to an all-star, I don't think so. I don't think Dahi Burke at centre-back for Galway merits being in. Liam Rush had some good games this year. And, everything else I'm seeing, there's not really a whole pile standing out here. I don't think anyone from Tipperary is going to be getting an all-star at centre-back either. So, is it pretty simple here that Declan Hannon gets it?
Well, Mark Coleman edged Hannon in our previous team. And, to me, Hannon had one of his best performances for Limerick in the final. Hit 2 points. The opposition, Cork, were rarely able to run down the middle. That's partly due to him. It's also partly due to, the protection that he has. So good on the ball. His distribution was absolutely outstanding. To me, again, they were quite close going into the final, and Hannon's stock rose and Coleman's stock fell. And then Coleman's stock falling is a lot to do with the way Cork set up and the fact that he, predominantly tracked Lynch, which I still can't really get my head around.
But they didn't do that the first day. The Jerry Millerick loss was a huge loss. Coleman wouldn't have been matched up with Lynch in the final if he was available. And if we go back to that Munster semi-final again, and obviously you have to take into account that Limerick improved a lot from then. They basically played with 7 defenders that day. Well, not always, because there was a bit of fluidity to how things went. But Jerry Millerick is a lovely matchup for Lynch in the sense that he's such a mobile player and he probably really enjoys man marking. I'm not saying he'd always get the better out of Lynch every single day, because Lynch is unbelievable. But Mark Coleman does his best stuff probably when he can get onto ball and not be man marking someone, and even when he can cover back. Look at the hit he put in Wally Walsh in the semi-final. I mean, so it's not just that he's a silky player only. He's capable of mixing it, but they certainly weren't playing to his strengths in the final there. But maybe that's part of it. I mean, you kind of have to be flexible enough to be able to do that marking job. Now, the counterpoint would be that Declan Hannon doesn't have to do that marking job. He is sitting there all day. And you know what? In some ways, a centre-back who gets to sit and doesn't have to really mark their man that much, which is akin to a sweeper, I don't like necessarily even giving them all-stars in the first place. Because, generally to win an all-star, you have to beat a man.
I know what you're saying, yeah. Hurling has changed that much, though. That's how good he is on the ball and how many attacks he starts. I think he definitely set up one goal with a ball down the line at one stage. His distribution inside is so good. The swiftness of the transition from defence to attack, I think he facilitates all of that. He's usually the apex of any triangle that they're building out of defence.
Hey, there's a great point here, actually. There's a great point here from Evan Ahern. To be fair, Coleman was on the best hurler in Ireland. He shouldn't miss out over that. And also, his team were on the back foot.
Yeah, okay. He was on the best hurler in Ireland, but he came off, he really came off second best against the best hurler in Ireland. It's Cian Lynch I saw in some papers, was given a 10 out of 10. So, someone who delivers 6 points in an All-Ireland final, fair enough, that can be taken into account. But if you somewhat break even, or it's, an 8 for Lynch and maybe a 7 for Coleman because he did lots of things himself. Coleman wasn't able to get on the ball the other day. You know what I mean? Yeah. Coleman is overall a better man marker than Hannon, Evan Ahern says. Maybe, but Limerick create the situation where Hannon doesn't have to mark as much. To me, Hannon is your prototype modern day centre back now. I know you're saying you want a centre back to mark, but if you were managing a team, you would not want him to mark. Am I right or wrong?
Correct.
Yeah. So Pádraig Walsh does have to come into the conversation there as well. Had a very, very good year at different stages, but he was definitely behind Hannon anyway, and probably maybe closer to Coleman. But Hannon is just Hannon is Limerick's quarterback. Everything, most good things that they do start through him. And when a guy delivers, I can't remember him playing much better for Limerick than he did in the final. He was definitely a 9 out of 10 for me. I think he was near flawless performance. And Hannon is the all-star centre-back for me anyway.
Yeah, maybe Kingston should look into the underage setup. Dara Connery says Grode Howley could develop into a good centre-back. He could indeed. Realistically, I don't think anyone is a match for man-mark and Lynch, says Conor Leahy. Now, obviously, I did say before, Jeremy Millerick did a good job the first day out. Pádraig Walsh, if you get a hammer in the final, your stock falls, the public are fickle. Declan Hannon is the ultimate deep-lying playmaker. Lads, does it really sum up how clueless we are about Limerick system that we think Barry Nash, Hannon and the people here are saying Burns have semi-free roles? Obviously somebody's marking. But there's an element of soft zonal in how they're marking too. Like they do pick up lads when they're in their area, but because their work rate is so good further up the field, and when they get the ball, they drag the other team around the place with those sort of hand passes and moving in triangles and stuff like that, and making sure they don't try and strike the ball until they're on the front foot in space. And physically, they're so massive that they can take it into contact or drag you into contact. There's a lot of reasons why they are on top in these games. And like at times you are semi-free when you're on the ball then because of it. And because of the pressure up the field, you don't have to, and like the midfielders sit back and the half-backs sit back. You don't actually need to be right up the backside of the guy you're marking all the time.
No, they're usually leaning back towards protecting the house a bit more. And that's usually it. They're not like, if me or you were playing in those positions, we'd probably be pushed up too far and trying to mark the man because that's their natural instinct. But they trust in O'Donoghue, O'Donovan, Morrissey, Hegarty filling off that space and allowing them, as defenders to sit back a bit more and defend the house a bit more. That's why people don't get shots, don't generally get, goal chances against Limerick, because everybody is falling back and everybody is playing a defensive role. And like the classic thing of, playing semi-free roles, as one of the viewers said there, like Tony Kelly was not man-marked when they played Limerick last year. They let him kind of float around and trusted in their system. And fair enough, he did an unbelievable amount of damage. But they still trusted that, Dermot Burns, when the ball was in around his area, that he was going to do an awful lot of damage on the ball. Same with Hayes, same with Hannon. But like I think, before we get to 7, we're looking at an all Limerick half back line here realistically.
Yeah, is there anyone else in the conversation other than Kyle Hayes?
Well, he's probably the more obvious of the three to be a definite all-star, I would have said.
Yeah, well, I mean, before the final, we were able to have a sort of, I would have felt a merited discussion about, well, like, is Tim O'Mahony in overall, is he going a little bit better? They both had a highlight reel goal, and you could argue that Hayes had 2 because of his one against Cork the first day out. Tim O'Mahony's against Dublin was fantastic stuff altogether. But I felt that there was a merit in the discussion beforehand. But after, you couldn't make a discussion to say that Tim O'Mahony would be ahead. And it feels like we're picking on him, we're not. But you couldn't really make that argument at this stage that it would be anyone other than Hayes at wing back. Even just looking through the other guys who played in wing back, Diarmuid Ryan is worth mentioning for Clare. I mean, he had a good year. I'm not saying unbelievable in every game, but he had a good year. Ger Millerick, as we've mentioned, he was quite good. Michael Carey did a bit for Kilkenny this year.
Gray at different stages for Dublin as well,
Kieran Bennett I thought was very good. Again, he's very good on the ball and playing that modern wing back style. Did a lot of good. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, 1 or 2 of the Laois lads did okay as well. But I think we might as well just go with Hayes here because it's not realistic.
The one thing about Shane is, well, obviously he's brilliant going forward. I think his defensive skills are actually underrated. I think he's so strong defensively. People will probably remember that he hit 3 wides the last day.
4.
That's fair enough. That 4 was a 4 going forward, but I think defensively he's so strong. I remember Robbie O'Flynn taking him on in the first half, I think it was the other day, and someone was like shouting, take him on. I was just thinking, really? Take him on? As fast as Robbie O'Flynn is, like, you're not going to get away from this lad really defensively. And I think he got back and put him under pressure, and I think it ended up wide. But I think defensively he's really, really strong. And he's hard enough to get at defensively. We look at the offensive stuff he does and it's great, but I think he's very, very difficult to get at defensively as well. Like he's big, physical, strong. I think he always gets his body in. He always gets in on top of a man. How often do you see him tangling with lads? He's in your face kind of defender as well. So yeah, I think he's when you're looking at the hurler of the year conversation, I'd say he's not far off that kind of 3-man shortlist as well.
Yeah, Joe LK20 in midfield. Will O'Donoghue is a guarantee. Darragh Donovan complimented him all year and man of the match in the semis. Tony Kelly is a half forward. Sunday game had him in midfield. Ridiculous. Kyle Hayes wasn't great shooting wise. Obviously, he did some job on the defensive end. Says Flash. Probably Hayes' weakest game of the year, but he's still 7 for me in that all-star team. Sean Chaplin of Clare needs to be in there, corner forward. Not really sure what that's about. But anyway, let's move to midfield here, because obviously you would be jumping straight towards the two guys that played for Limerick. And because they dominated their games, if we said the likes of Jamie Byrne, well, people will jump in and say, well, what did they do against Limerick that day? And, that is a fair point, but you're in a team that's kind of losing all over the field. So it's much easier to sort of choke a guy out of a game when your team isn't winning any ball anywhere in that sector and you're being completely overwhelmed. So what you're asking the Limerick midfielders to do there versus what you're asking Jamie Byrne to do is very, very different. So what has Jamie Byrne done this year against the Head in games where, Waterford are really, really up against it? Like, he just came back after being out for months against Galway and tore them to shreds. Scored 4 points for play, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think did he have 3 points in the first 10 minutes against Tipperary, and was involved in a goal that they got as well. And yeah, it's a difficult one. Like, Will O'Donoghue is an absolute lock for me at midfield. Darragh O'Donovan to a lesser extent, and I do think that second midfield spot is definitely up for serious debate. Anyway, so one viewer mentioned Luke Meade there, who in fairness was probably one of the Cork players that came away with some credit last Sunday. He tried very, very hard. I think he got a score just before half time as well. He's definitely one player that would come into the conversation, I would say. Anyway, like, what are your own thoughts? Like, Jamie Byrne, me and you both have huge time for Jamie Byrne. Like, obviously he wasn't playing in the final. O'Donovan's stock rose further in the final. Some of what Byrne did against the Head was, just absolute superb stuff, and he was back to his best. Obviously, you have to take into account that he was very, very quiet against Limerick again. Well, I would say that he was quiet against Limerick until he probably went inside. And I think going into that full forward line I know like we're putting him for a midfield all-star, but what he did in full forward line, getting two scores, and even that forcing that mad save from Nicky Quaid off the side of his helmet definitely does help his case a bit more.
I can definitely see why you pick Will O'Donoghue here, and I don't think I'll argue with that at all. I think Darragh O'Donovan definitely had some good games as well. He's had a fine season. Luke Meade and Jamie Byrne, they're the ones that stand out the most. Cahill Malone, I would have said that he, even though he's named number 9 in the match programme that I'm looking at against Tipperary, I would have said that he was probably playing a little bit further forward. He was mentioned in a few of these comments. What do you think? Is he in this conversation?
I think he's in the wing forward conversation.
We'll leave him out of this conversation for now.
And we're not pigeonholing Tony Kelly in midfield. Tony Kelly didn't play midfield, so we're not trying to pigeonhole him in there. Yeah,
I think some of Kilkenny's struggles are at midfield, so I don't think anyone is being considered there as far as I'm concerned. Rian McBride and Conor Burke did okay. I don't think quite to be mentioned here. Keelan Malloy had a very good season at midfield for Antrim. Look, they're not in the latter stages of the championship. It's going to be hard to kind of put them in here. I think Jack Kelly played very well at times, especially in that relegation playoff game that sent Antrim down to the Joe McDonagh.
Where are we considering? We'll say Paddy Purcell. Are we considering him at half forward? Or are we considering?
I'd say wing forward. Yeah, wing forward.
Okay.
Because anytime I saw him, that's where he played. I don't think we're going to be talking about anyone from Galway. Peter Hogan had a good season for Waterford, but I'd be putting Jamie Byrne ahead of him. To be honest, I'm going with Luke Meade here, and he didn't even start the first day out against Limerick. But as the season came on, I think he was a transformative player in the team. Like, that a lot of what has helped them go from a team that's flaky and, you'd even think that this is a forward playing at midfield, which to some degree he is. But even though with his club, I do believe that he plays in the Newcestown man. He does play centre back for them at times. But I'd just be thinking the impact that he's had in their season and how brave he is getting on the ball, taking on his man, moving the ball forward. Had a pretty decent final considering Limerick absolutely annihilated Cork. I'd be pushing for Luke Meade here alongside Will O'Donoghue.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's definitely a tricky one. It's a three man kind of a showdown with Byrne, Meade, and O'Donovan. I think if I was leaning towards one, it probably would be O'Donovan. But I wouldn't be that put out at either of the three been in here. Been honest with you, and I think Meath did come away with some credit from the All Ireland final, when very few others did outside of maybe Harnedy and maybe Patrick Horgan as well.
I'll put it to you this way: did anyone in the Limerick starting team not come away with credit?
Yeah, but Shane,
they had it that easy.
Really? Okay, but can you really justify giving Luke Meath an All-Star? Do you think he was in All-Star form this year? Genuinely now. Now, let's, and I know we're not trying to look outside of the obvious here, but maybe we're just looking too far away from what the obvious is.
But when you're completely on top in every game, you really have to just pick the guys who were absolutely most central to that, which is what we're doing with Limerick here. And there's no way that some of these other lads didn't do unbelievably well for other teams to get to an All-Ireland final. And in most games for those other teams, they're playing, it's uphill battles. It's not like Waterford were cruising past the teams they played. They had to come through. They obviously played in Munster in the first case, had a very poor outing against Clare. But then they played against Galway, they played against Tipperary, they played against Limerick. And obviously they were pretty poor against Laois before that. These are much, much tighter games. So it's much more difficult to stand up. And for Barron to go from a standing start to the season, having been injured, to play the way he did, I think that was brilliant. And just the breakthrough that Cork have made this year, I think a lot of it is down to how well Meath has played. Darragh Fitzgibbon has been in the half-forward line, so I'm not even talking about him for this conversation. Conor Cahill was quite good, but I don't think quite enough in the latter part, well, certainly in the final to be considered here. But that's why I'm just going with Meath, because he was like a key cog in helping Cork kick on to that next level.
No disrespect to Luke Meath, I can't stand over him as a midfield all-star. I just can't. He hasn't been outstanding enough to earn an all-star, Shane. This is the cream of the crop. To me, he's number 3 behind O'Donovan and Barron.
So a skill says here that Donovan got a man of the match too. I think that was against the semi-final.
He did not.
Did he not get in the semi-final? He did,
but he was a man of the match. Tom Morrissey was man of the match in that game. He got 5 points from play and was outstanding.
Dan Morrissey. Or Tom Morrissey, yeah, sorry.
Tom Morrissey, yeah.
Yeah. Barron disappeared against Limerick, says Conor Leahy. Meath absolutely solid every game, says Evan Ahern. If Kelly isn't in the forward line, just put him in midfield. We haven't even got to that. We don't even know who's in the forward line.
Can't do that. I honestly think it's between Barron and O'Donovan. There's going to have to be some sort of a middle ground here between the two of us.
Yeah. So you're saying Barron or O'Donovan, and I'm saying Meath.
Yeah.
So, God Almighty, how are we going to solve this one?
Well, you think Meath is number 1 of the 3. I think Meath is number 3 of the 3.
Yeah, I'd be putting Barron second, and I've been pumping.
There's potentially to me is the common denominator between the two of us.
Which?
Jamie Barron.
Right. Okay. Do you know what? Probably not the worst. Yeah. Okay. We'll go.
Definitely not the worst. Anyway, it's just I understand where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from with your argument. With due respect to him, I just couldn't stand. I couldn't stand over Luke Meath as an all-star this year. I don't think he was in all-star form. Whereas Jamie Barron lit it up in a couple of games. He was in all-star form. That's my own opinion anyway.
Yeah, well, we're definitely not going to please everybody here, so we might as well go with that. Jamie Barron at number 8 and Will O'Donoghue at number 9. So moving on to the half-forward line.
Yeah, it doesn't get much easier. Will we just put Keane Lynch in centre forward and marvel at his brilliance for a minute? Brian McDonald did a great piece on, I think it was in Monday's Examiner, just going through his stats for the year. His ball retention rate is outstanding. I think he set up something like 2-5 in the All-Ireland final. Or was it no? He could have been directly involved in more than that, but he was involved in so many scores for Limerick, as well as clipping over 6 points in the final. He was brilliant against Tipp. He was brilliant in the All-Ireland final. He was, at important stages in that Cork game, the first day out, he got 2 points when they needed him, when Casey was off the pitch. I think Parakill says Shane capitulates to Verney. I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it's just finding a middle ground when we both have different opinions on who should be there.
Yeah, Garrod Howley says Morrissey, Lynch, Kelly for the half forward line.
I would definitely be leaning towards, if you're going for one of the Limerick half forwards, I would definitely be having Tom Morrissey ahead of Hegarty, despite Hegarty's final. Like, we have to look at here as well. We Cahill Malone at wing forward on our All-Star team pre-final. Like, is the swell of support for Tony Kelly and what's out there in other media circles, are we going to bow to that, or are we going to stick to our guns? And has anybody done anything to usurp Cahill Malone in the All-Ireland final? I don't think so.
I'd say Seamus Harnedy, possibly. I don't think he was brilliant against Kilkenny, even though he came up with a crucial score or two late on when it did matter, to be fair to him. Let's see, yeah, he got 2 points. One of them was an extra time against Kilkenny, so I think that mattered. He scored 4 points in the All-Ireland final in a team that was beaten out the gate. He was very good for Cork against Limerick the first day out, when up until the point that he got injured and had to go off. Like, he'd caught 2 clean puck outs. He was in the game. He was very good that day. He was very good against Dublin. I think Harnedy actually does get in here.
You think he gets in the starting 15?
Yeah. Well, like, we talked about Tony Kelly, and we'd Cahill Malone ahead of him in the half forward line, because we just felt that he'd just done that little bit more of this year, even though, like, you and I obviously rate Kelly unbelievably highly, but just I think that we had rated Malone's performances that bit more highly this year. Obviously, we're not saying he's a better player, obviously not.
No, but I think he was a better player this year. If we're honest, unless we're trying to pigeonhole Kelly in midfield or something like that. I wouldn't have Harnedy in over Malone. I wouldn't have Harnedy in over Malone. Like, fair enough, he got 4 points in the All-Ireland final. But I think it's more like Ozzie Gleeson last year, when he was one of the better players when things were going badly. Like, his performances up until the final, he wasn't really in the mix before the final. Fair, he had a decent final, but like, we're basically looking at 4 possessions that ended up in 4 points. I don't, outside of that, like, I don't remember him really getting on much. But I know you're saying he scored 4 points, and that's fine. I don't remember him being on much ball or having much of an influence in play, or stopping the Limerick half back line going forward, or stopping their influence there outside of the scores he got.
The lad played well in pretty much every game this year. He did look a little bit ropey against Kilkenny at times, and by that I mean first touch. A few times he miscontrolled the ball, and he had to go at a second time, and I thought that was a little bit odd. But I think he was really good the first day out. Thought he was brilliant against Dublin. How did he do against Clare? I'm struggling to remember.
He went off after 50 minutes the first day against Limerick, remember? Yeah,
but he was still brilliant while he was on the field, and probably that's one of the major reasons that they didn't go on and win the game, is because he had to go off. They lost that ball winner. I'm just going to check and see how he did against Clare in that qualifier, because I just can't remember that game, whatever it is. And if he got a few decent scores in here, he's 2 points from play.
I remember him finding pockets of space that day from the puck out. He got a couple of scores that day, yeah.
Yeah, and like, he had a brilliant final with 4 points. I know you say, what did he do otherwise? But like, he got more from play than, Shane Kingston got a goal, but like, in terms of points from play, he got more than the rest of the Cork forward line put together. So, we're going to be talking Patrick Horgan in a minute, but I'm nearly looking at putting Harnedy in ahead of it.
If we're looking at putting a Cork forward in, I'd be putting Jack O'Connor in ahead of the two of them.
Yeah, but we're probably going to be talking about him on the inside forward line. So we are going half forward. So is Morrissey and Hegarty, I don't think we can necessarily look at this and be like, well, look, there's not going to be any Cork lad getting in here in this forward line. They obviously put up some big scores.
I never said that, but I'm still sticking with Cahill Malone for wing forward. I think consistently over the games that he played, he was more consistent and more influential across the games that he played, in my opinion, than Seamus Harnedy, albeit they didn't get as far as Cork did.
Yeah. But sure, yeah. Cahill Malone, I'm looking at him against Tipperary, he scored a point that day. Not sure that he had a brilliant game. Again, it's tough to remember every single game, but I don't know if he kind of stood out head and shoulders in that game in particular. Like, I remember a bit more what the likes of Ryan Taylor did that day, for example.
Yeah, he was still very solid that day. He was still a 7 out of 10 that day. He was probably man of the match against Wexford when he got 1-3. And the other game, against Cork. Did he get 3 points against Cork as well? And he was obviously brilliant the first day when they beat Waterford as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, are you going to seriously make a case for him being ahead of Hegarty and Marcy?
No, I'm going to make a case of him being ahead of Harnedy, and I'm going to have Morrissey one wing, Lynch centre forward, and Malone the other wing. That's my half-forward line.
Sorry, where's Morrissey playing?
Wing forward.
So your half-forward line is, you've named 4 lads there?
No, Morrissey, Hayes, Malone.
Morrissey, Hayes, Malone. And where does Keane Lynch fit in?
Oh, sorry. Hayes, sorry. Lynch was who I meant centre forward. So it's Morrissey, Lynch, Malone. Apologies.
So no Hegarty?
No Hegarty for me, no.
Scored 2-2 in an All-Ireland final?
Yeah, I thought he did a quiet year up until that.
So you're going Morrissey, one wing forward, and you're saying Cahill Malone the other. I don't think I can stand over Malone being wing forward. I thought he was quite good, but just Harnedy with too much done in big games that really matter in Croke Park. Every game matters, obviously, but like we're talking about what he did in the biggest games of the year. And to me, when you play against Limerick twice and you make an impact both days, when we've talked about so many players, all these match programs I have here, and other players didn't play well against Limerick throughout the year, I just can't justify not having Harnedy in there. And I generally capitulate to you on most picks, but I'm going to have to really insist here that Harnedy gets in. So I'm just putting him in because it is those big games. It is the All-Ireland final. It's like semi-final. I know he was up and down, and definitely Morrissey gets in the other wing forward. So how will you capitulate? Just capitulate.
I tell you what, it was like I couldn't capitulate to Meath. I'm more inclined to agree with you on Harnedy, but I still don't agree. And there's lads going mad here about Cahill Malone, and I wonder were they watching the same games that we were watching?
Yeah, this is the thing. Stapleton the dictator, Paddy Purcell. He's worth a mention for sure.
Yeah, was it 1-4? Was it 1-4 against Waterford that day? He was absolutely outstanding that day. He was obviously quiet enough against Wexford the first day when everybody was quiet. But in their most important game of the year, he had a big game, and he had a big game against. He was decent against Antrim as well when they played them in that kind of relegation game as well. But as regards being in the conversation for an All-Star, he should get a nomination, definitely. Yeah. But as regards actually getting into 15, I don't think so.
Yeah, Joe LK20 says, more argument for O'Connor than Hardy. Ridiculous, Shane. You're trying to get a Cork man in. By the way, we haven't even mentioned the likes of Adrian Mullen. Billy Ryan often wore 12, but he was playing more on the inside line. We haven't mentioned Stephen Bennett, although I'm not sure he'd get into this conversation. Is there anyone else?
Jack Prendergast definitely deserves to be mentioned as well. Before the All-Ireland semi-final, he was in the equation, be it centre forward or wing forward. But just because of the hard graft that he did, and I remember that lovely hand pass against Tipperary to set up a goal, but he was totally snuffed out against Limerick. He was going to be in the equation had he had a big performance against Limerick, but he was totally snuffed out that day. I still think he'll get a nomination though.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned how good Danny Sutcliffe was this year, and he was really good. Even Donald Burke, I think he got something like 6 from play against Cork. He scored 2 from play against Galway in that game. Obviously, they were down so many players against Kilkenny, so that definitely it obviously means that Dublin aren't going to play as well as they probably could. Jason Ford playing the way he did in that first half, especially against Limerick. He also got a nice few scores against Clare in the Munster quarter final, or is it semi-final, whichever it was. So there's a few other guys there as well, but I think we probably have landed. Adrian Mullen was very, very good, but I think we kind of probably have landed on the players that we are going to pick.
Well, you have anyway.
Yeah, but look, I want Luke Meade in the team, and you don't want to see it. So there's a bit of horse trading going on here. Chris Crummy would fit into that Limerick system, says John Crawford. Full forward line, says Connor, Jack O'Connor, Seamus Flanagan, and Peter Casey. So let's get to it. Who's in this full forward line?
Well, the one certainty I would say would have to be Flanagan at the edge of the square. Just very hard to go. He only scored a point in the All-Ireland final. I think he was directly involved in 1-5. Just took Robert Downey on a tour of the pitch at different stages and looked so comfortable on the ball. this was probably his best year for Limerick, and he was just probably missed out last year, and probably just missed out in 18 as well. But I think he was brilliant. He was brilliant this year. He was the fulcrum of that attack, and to me, he's nearly more important than Aaron Gallan to this team at the moment.
Yeah, a comment here from It Wasn't Me. No way should Gallan be in. Played well for 2.5 games. All green, says Joel K20. I think we can see where he's coming from. Garrod Howley, Owen Cody and Austin Gleeson, honourable mentions. I'd agree with that. Hoggy was the overall top scorer, says PH12, and scored more points from play than Tony Kelly. And look at the year he's had. Lads, Harnedy, you might as well have put O'Connor 12 and then Gleeson, Flanagan, Casey. But we're trying to pick lads in the position that they're in. Evan Ahern, says Jack O'Connor. Verney can't get over how we beat his beloved Kilkenny in the semi and doesn't want any Cork player, says that. Yeah, it's not the first time you've been accused of anti-Cork sentiment.
No, I wouldn't have had as much of a problem with Jack O'Connor out wing forward, given that he played there quite a bit and drifted out there in games, particularly in the Kilkenny game. I would have been happier with him at 12 than Harnedy. But again, I'm reluctant to start putting lads in positions that they weren't predominantly starting games in. So, like, I listen, I'm not happy with Harnedy wing forward. There's no point in saying any different. And I'd say the vast majority of the OurGame universe is not, but such is life.
We have a bit of breaking news, and that's that apparently it's been reported, Michael Moynihan is tweeting about it, a journalist with the Examiner, that Liam Cahill is staying with Waterford.
Whoa.
You can imagine how buzzing I am with that.
Jeez, that's massive news. Massive news with massive consequences. I had heard yesterday from Waterford sources that he had contacted some of the Waterford players in recent weeks and about being back training in November, be ready to come back training in November. But listen, we'll see how it plays out. But there must have been a good counter offer from Waterford, and the fact of the work that he's done in Waterford and what he's building. But Jesus, right, okay, that's a game changer.
That is huge. That would be a gut punch to the supporters of Tipperary, because they would have felt that this was a done deal. If you look at it, obviously the under-8 success, minor All-Ireland, under-21 All-Ireland, under-20 All-Ireland, went and had really promising 2 years. This is assuming that this is exactly how the story pans out now. Had a really good 2 years at Waterford, and you're thinking, right, this guy is as road tested as can be, knows every hurler in Tipperary, will just step in now and guide Tipperary through the sort of semi-transitional period that is there. I think Tipp supporters are going to be very, very upset with this, because in many respects it was just a case of, like, this guy obviously loves Tipperary. We saw how he reacted to Waterford beating Tipperary. He didn't like necessarily being in that position, I would imagine, of beating his home county. And now you've got, like, it just seemed like this was kind of written in the stars, that it was like Liam is coming home, that kind of thing. But now you've got to wonder, how did this break down? Because Tipperary did speak to him last week, and you would have imagined, as long as the offer that's on the table, and in terms of, what resources he's going to be given this year and so on and so forth, and the amount of commute he's even going to save himself and Mikey Beavens, the size of the commute, everything just seemed to suggest this is more or less just set in stone. How on earth has this been messed up is the question. Now, maybe it's a case that Cahill just decided, okay, this isn't for me. But if that's the case, I would have thought that he was going to be looking to take this job, and it was just a case of, let's just not mess this up and make sure the offer that we make to him, that he's happy with that. I would see this as a massive faux pas if, unless he just decided himself that he wasn't going to take it. But otherwise, this is a massive mess up.
Yeah, we obviously don't know exactly what's happened in the background in Tipperary, and what the nature of the conversations were, which took place last week, I believe. And now it just throws up. It's so interesting, like, who will actually manage Tipperary next year. It's a huge one for Waterford, I have to say. It's a massive one for them. They would be seen by many as the one team that could potentially take down Limerick, and have maybe the style that could take down Limerick, and maybe we'll learn from their lessons of this year, trying to take them on physically, and maybe we'll try and take them on a bit more pace-wise and tried to move the ball a bit quicker if they play them next year. But it's a huge statement from Cahill of where he thinks Waterford can go. On the flip side of that, it's just a massive kick in the stomach for Tipperary supporters, and I would say the Tipperary squad as well at the moment. But listen, I'm sure they'll go and try. I'm sure they're already moving to try and get the next best man in place.
Yeah, well, John Fogarty, the Examiner, is tweeting some quotes from Liam Cahill. I fully understand that this decision will please some, but deeply disappoint many others. The position of the Tipperary senior hurling manager is extremely attractive, and one it did not take lightly. Mikey Beavens and I felt duty-bound to give careful consideration to Waterford after their response to us in the past 2 years. So he's obviously, they obviously did have that discussion with Tipperary, and wow, I mean, I'm pretty stunned. I'm sure you can kind of get that from my tone, from my tone.
Can I just say, Cahill is obviously, and I knew this anyway, but he's seriously a man of honour, right? By all accounts, I'd say he had told the Waterford guys that he would love to stay building and move on from what they've done and get to the next level. And even though I would say the job that he always wanted was on his table, he obviously felt duty-bound to stay with Waterford and push on to another level with the team that he has built from the ground. So, yeah, that's imagine what the Waterford lads must be bouncing. They must be bouncing to think that this guy is basically, a tip man who always wanted the tip job has given his faith in us and left his faith in us. It's a massive confidence boost for them, I'd imagine.
What does that say about Tipperary? Does it, look, maybe he was offered a job given a great deal and he decided not to. Maybe it was a thing where the wrong thing was said or he didn't feel like he would have had the full backing. But what does it say about Tipperary? So, as Brian White says here, what a brave and right decision by Cal. If he wins an All-Ireland with Watford, it would be worth more than 3 with Tip.
Oh, I don't know about that. Liam Cahill would love to win an All-Ireland with Tipperary more than anything else, I'd say. It's just circumstances probably dictate the fact that they obviously have invested an awful lot in Waterford and emotionally and time-wise, everything. And they obviously feel that they have more to give and that the management team have more to give them as well. So what does it say about Tip? I don't think it paints too favourably on Tip. I think it would be fair to say, to be honest with you. And it looks like there's a massive transition going to happen there. And the person leading that transition needs to be the right person. We thought Cahill was the right person. Everything suggested that he would have been the right person. So hard to know what direction they turn now.
I wonder if some of it, the snub in late 2018, and that would have left a sour taste in his mouth. And I just wonder if the wrong thing was said. Is it kind of like, well, look, after what happened in late 2018 when I got snubbed, he'd won what he'd won with Tipperary underage. Did he just get a vibe? And maybe he's just like, it's such a sweet situation with Waterford in terms of like, I'm loved down there, it's moving in the right direction, this team's hitting its peak right now. But I mean, this is the thing now. This could rule him out being Tipperary manager forevermore for not taking it when it was there.
Yeah, it could do, yeah. And you do, as we've said on previous shows, you don't know when this will come up again. You just don't know. So it's a really, really brave call, I have to say, because you can imagine how much the heartstrings were pulling at him to go back to Tipperary. It's a very, very, very brave call, because so much like everything would have been saying to follow his heart, and he's followed. I'd imagine he's followed his head, which is a very, very difficult thing to do when the ties of home come into it. So just, fair play to him in many ways. But from a Tip point of view, I'd imagine the wind has been taken out of your sails, and it's going to be interesting to see what direction you go now. Really, really interesting. Yeah,
you're kind of marveling at it to some degree.
I'm not marveling at it. I'm sure the alternatives in Tip are still very strong. That is to assume that they will stay inside Tip. I'd imagine they will. Obviously, Willie Maher was one of the lads who was very high in the equation before Liam Sheedy got the job. Him and Liam Cahill. So it'd be interesting to see whether they go back that direction or not. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Waterford must be dancing though. They have to be dancing. This is some confirmation of his belief in that squad.
Yeah, and like, you know, Willie Maher's based in Bennett's Bridge, so he's probably equidistant. I mean, I'm sure Wexford have been onto him as well, so he's kind of equidistant between the two places. So I'm sure he's in the conversation for both now. Brendan Cummins, maybe, you know, if you were going to go for somebody who's, you know, so well respected around Tipperary, obviously you know him well enough from dealing with him in the Independent. Then obviously Dara Egan will be in the conversation, maybe Darren Gleeson also. There are guys there, but it's just because the whole county was thinking, let's get Cahill, let's get Cahill, let's get Cahill. Whoever does take over now at this point, it's almost like they're starting behind the 8 ball because they're not Cahill.
Is it fair to say this is a twist that we just didn't see the managerial merry-go-round taken?
I'm stunned. I think it's so obvious that I'm stunned here. Do you know? That's a giant blow to Tipp.
Yeah, I don't agree that Cahill will never manage Tipp now. I don't agree with that. He was with a team. It's not as if he was free. He's with a team. Things might have happened in the background where his 2-year deal is up or whatever. But like, he may have committed already to staying with Waterford, because when you know, Liam Sheedy was still Tipperary manager while Cahill was in Waterford, there may already have been a commitment made there, and he may have felt like that commitment couldn't be broken. I do not agree that he can never take the Tipperary job. I don't think that, like, fair enough, under the current Tipp regime who have offered him this job, would they go back to him again in 2 years? Possibly not. But regimes change. I think Liam Cahill will definitely manage Tipp. Don't tell me that he won't manage Tipp. Of course he will.
Yeah, but it won't be because of his CV that he won't. It's just like noses can go out of joint, and the wave of goodwill that's behind him now. Let's say he manages for Waterford for the next 3 years, and obviously best of luck to him. You know, he's doing really well. But let's say they have some fractious matches with Tipperary in the next couple of years. Like, there's going to be a little bit of ire in the stands now, and obviously there'll be far more supporters in the stands next summer. Can you imagine the jawing that's going to be happening in his direction and standing on the sideline if he comes out at Semple Stadium out under the tunnel? Do you know, like, it's pretty obvious the things that are going to be said straight away. And imagine 3 years of that. And then he's supposed to, and let's say he has those fractious games, and then he comes back and he takes over Tipperary. Then perhaps he's behind the 8 ball because the goodwill isn't there the way it would have been right now.
Yeah, as Waterford manager now, like for the previous 2 years, he did have the support of Tipperary people, whereas he probably will not have a lot of that now. But I think those things are quickly forgotten when time moves on a bit, and yet there probably will be fractious different things will happen against Tipp. That's only natural, but I think it would be very short-sighted of Tipp folk, particularly Tipp top brass, not to realise that, you know, he mightn't feel he's the best man for the job now, or he might feel he's best suited somewhere else, but that will change quickly in a couple of years, I'd imagine. And it will all be forgotten if he manages Tipp in 5 years' time and they win something. That won't even be mentioned. I just think it's a twist. It's a twist that I definitely didn't see. This kind of merry-go-round taken.
You see, you probably think we've short memories in Tipperary, you know, and you know that won't be forgotten. And I mean, I think he's, like, I've interviewed him before. It's on the OurGame channel there from a while back. Like, he's a gent to deal with, a gent to talk to, but like that sort of stuff, it won't be forgotten easily. I just look at a couple more of the comments here. Patrick Hickey says, public slap in the face to the Tipp County Board. I presume this is another Clare man here, Micheál McCarthy. If Brian Lohan can manage Clare and we know about his relationship with the Fitzgeralds, then surely it's possible for Cahill to manage Tipp in the future. A very, very fair point. And obviously a bit of sneering going on here with, there's a little sneery comment here somewhere about Davy Fitz for Tipperary. Dreams do come true. # on the Premier. That's definitely sneery. Connor says, what about the full forward line? We'll come back to the full forward line in our all-star team in a second.
I love how you're basically admitting that, like, Tipperary folk are some of the bitterest folk out there with the shortest memories.
We sure are.
At least you've admitted it anyway.
No, GA folk are. Come on, we all are. We're all a little bit like that. Colin Bonner won with Ballyhale and WIT. Surely has a role in Tipperary hurling. Very, very fair point as well. I've also interviewed
involved with Dixborough at the moment as well. Yeah.
Let me just see now. His term was up at Waterford and he snubbed his own county, says Pádraig Gill. Who would want someone like that again? Tipperary aren't going to be cuckolded. And are the All-Stars only 12 players now? Bad and Davy for Tipp, says Joe Murray. People are looking to wind me up, and by God, it's working. Anyway, we'll get back to this All-Star team. What on earth were we talking about there? And does it even matter anymore?
We were talking about how the number 12 spot on the All-Star team, even though you have it written in and we're not happy with it. I know we had
look, that's the least of our issues. That is the least of our issues at this stage.
I'd say I could get anybody into this All-Star 15 now at this stage. I'd say I could nearly be corner forward on it. I'd say you'll just wave the white flag at this stage. You're that deflated.
Look, Tipp or Tipp, and Tipp will be back next year. Look, can we agree on that?
Yeah, I tell you what, I can't wait to see who's going to take over now. Because names in the Tipperary backroom team have been linked with other counties, and now it's going to be. I didn't think the merry-go-round could get more interesting, but it just has. Yeah,
things have just kicked on to the next level. So what about Jack O'Connor? We talked about him before. Actually, Waterford have confirmed a 12-month term with Liam Cahill. That's been confirmed now. So it's not a 3-year deal, it's a 12-month term. Forget about the All-Star team for a second. But 12 months.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because, where does that leave anybody? Where does that leave Liam Cahill? Where does that leave Waterford? You're just talking about a rolling 1-year deal. Tipperary are going to get a manager in, and they're not going to install him for 12 months. So,
yeah,
that's John Fogarty tweeting that now.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, maybe Liam knows something that we don't, and Tipperary are going to have an interim manager for a year, and then Liam is going to take over for the 2023 season. I don't know, but that's a strange one now. Does he think he can get it done in 1 year? I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting one now. I would have thought it was for minimum 2, more than likely 3.
Yeah, look, there's possibly an option of another as well. We'll see how that plays out, but that certainly is a little wrinkle that I definitely wasn't expecting. There's a lot in a succession of things I wasn't expecting. That's definitely high up, in the list anyway. Yeah. Let's see. We're going back to this All-Star team for what it's worth at this stage. But where does Jack O'Connor fit in? We've picked Seamus Flanagan. He's definitely in there. So what are you thinking here? Does Jack O'Connor still get in?
Yeah, he's definitely high up on it. Where does Tony Kelly come into the conversation in the full forward line?
Look, he had a really good season, but look at what Peter Casey did in the final: 5 points in 24 minutes. Crucial in a lot of other games. I know he got the red card against Waterford. It was rescinded, so we might as well not consider a red card here when we're totting things up. He was good in that game. A couple of his stick passes were brilliantly, the way he was moving the defenders around. And did he score from that game? He scored a couple of points from play as well. So for me, I think Casey has a very strong case in here. And Patrick Horgan, are you putting Aaron Gillan in here?
No,
scored 1-3 from play in the All-Ireland. He scored 1 from play in the All-Ireland semi-final. He came on against Tipp, and definitely that was a big part in changing the game there.
I'm not happy with. I wouldn't be happy with having Jack O'Connor and Seamus Hannity both in the forward line.
No, neither would I. It's going to be one or the other. Desi Hutchinson had a decent season. Austin Gleeson is in the conversation. Don't think he quite makes it into this. Conor Whelan had a very good season overall for Galway as well. We should definitely not ignore him. Owen Cody was brilliant. Yeah,
Owen Cody was good in fairness. But you'd have to say Casey is definitely in pole position for one. Casey had 15 points from play in 4 games.
What about Jack O'Connor then?
I can't have 2 Cork lads in this forward line. I can't have these 2 Cork players in the forward line anyway.
Yeah.
I still don't think it should be too late to potentially move Jack O'Connor out to the half forward line and drop Seamus Hannity out.
But you were very strong, when we were picking the set.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Because I wanted to do that exact thing, and you said no.
I just don't think, and this is not been disrespectful to Seamus Hannity, I just don't think he's done enough to earn an All-Star place. I think Jack O'Connor has done more, even albeit with a quieter final, to have earned an All-Star place.
And he was very quiet for 45 to 50 minutes against Kilkenny, just like Hannity.
Yeah, but he rocketed into the game when they needed him most, and that goal was really what tipped the balance in the wind-up.
Yeah, it probably was, but Hannity still got he was quiet for the first half and a lot of the second half, but he still got one in the second half, and he got a point in extra time, and then he had a way better final than Jack O'Connor.
Yeah, true enough. But there's no way the two of them can be in the team.
Yeah, I'd give it to Harnedy. And I'd play lads in their position.
Okay, so who are you looking at for the full forward line then? So Jack O'Connor is not in the equation.
Well, I think he is in the equation, but I think he probably won't get in. Like, would you put Jack O'Connor ahead of Owen Cody?
Yeah, probably would marginally. Yeah.
Okay. A couple of lads did all right for Dublin, maybe Conor Whelan. There's nobody outside of those that I think that we're missing out. Jake Morris was decent at times.
Does Tony Kelly come into the mix in the full forward line?
No, he was in there.
Yeah,
but I just don't think he's quite done enough.
I think Clare are hard pressed not to have a player in the forward line, either Malone or Kelly. And you have to remember, like Kelly's position in the full forward line against Waterford was a massive part in them winning the game. Both him on the scoreboard and preventing Cahill Lyons from playing well. He got 1-1 from play against Tipp. He turned the game when he went into the inside full forward line against Cork as well. And Clare would have gotten through had it not been for that great Patrick Collins save. So, like, I definitely think Tony Kelly is in the conversation in the full forward line.
And just another further confirmation from Waterford. They say that Liam Cahill will stay on for 2022 with an option then of a further 12 months.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll
you
see.
Can't get your head around this. You're totally frazzled. It's quite amusing, I have to say.
Yeah. So I think Peter Casey's in here with number 15 anyway.
I think so. 15 points from play in four games, and he only played half of the All Ireland final.
Yeah. So that's Peter Casey.
For the show, for the jink that turned Niall O'Leary inside out nearly alone, and just like his little size 30 or 31 inch hurl and just how he makes it talk, you know.
Yeah. Okay. And then the final guy. So we've only one more guy here. We're picking between the likes of Aaron Gillan, picking Owen Cody or Jack O'Connor. Is there anyone else?
Tony Kelly.
Aaron Gillan. Look, are we ruling out Aaron Gillan? I think he was good, but like probably one or two times, probably not quite at the same level. A couple of more comments in here. Flanagan and Casey, absolute certs. Yeah, we've kind of gone with that. Saint and Verney for the Tipperary job. Just get on the phone to us there. Jack O'Connor was Cork's best forward, says Conor Heaney. Look, I do think he was up against it in that All-Ireland final. How often did he get the ball in space? O'Connor over Harnedy, says Evan Ahern. Malone is robbed, says Grode Howley. Casey and Gillan, adds Conor Lahey. And Kelly should be there somewhere, definitely ahead of Barron. But he didn't play out midfield, so I don't see how Kelly could be in ahead of Barron. So, right, there's one last position here. Are you pushing for Kelly in ahead of Jack O'Connor, Cody and Gillan?
I am.
You're pushing hard. Even though you had said in the early All-Stars before the All-Ireland final that if we put Cahill Malone in now, are we going to later revise it to have Kelly in? And we said we're going to stick to our guns on this.
Yeah, I did say that. I do think one of them at least deserves to be in. I think there's a lot more competition, a lot more really, really stiff competition for that half forward line spot than there is in the full forward line. In the sense that, yeah, Gillan was good. I don't think it was his best season. Owen Cody was good, much better than he had been in previous seasons, and Jack O'Connor was very good up until the final. Whereas, you know, Kelly's performances in the full forward line were outstanding. And I know you could say he drifts out maybe to the half forward line as well. That's the nature of his role. But most of the damage that he did was in the full forward line.
Okay. Right, okay. I just can't separate them, really. I find it really, really difficult. Because I just don't think we can have Kelly in now when we didn't have him in the semi-final. I think lads drop out from the early All-Stars team, that they don't find a way back in.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but maybe Jack O'Connor has played his way out. Owen Cody hasn't done. Yeah, obviously he didn't play the final, so he hasn't done anything to further his case. But maybe it's with the benefit of hindsight as well. And just looking back at Kelly's performances a little more forensically and seeing exactly what he did, and maybe seeing that. I don't know if any of those candidates in the full forward line have done much more than him this year. And I don't think they have in hindsight.
So even Jack O'Connor scored that goal against Clare. He was very good with 3 points the first day out against Limerick. All-Ireland final didn't go his way. He did score a point. made one or two okay runs. You're just ruling them out.
We both agreed that we're not going to move lads into positions that they didn't play in. And while he played half forward, if we were gutless, we'd maybe put him wing forward. We're not doing that. We're picking lads in their positions. So I think there was Kelly. I think Kelly probably maybe deserves to be in a corner forward, maybe more than Jack O'Connor. If we wanted it, we could accommodate them. We could accommodate them all and move them around. But I don't think that's what we're doing.
So we're going with Tony Kelly.
I'm happy with that.
Okay. Listen,
I'm not happy with Harnedy. You're probably not happy with Tony Kelly. That's the way it works sometimes.
Well, there's our team. Let's see. How many players do we have in from Limerick? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 none. So we've gone for a record 10 Limerick players. The most that the Kilkenny team won during their era of dominance was 9, and we've gone for 10 here for Limerick.
Yeah, I don't think it's like it is going to be probably 9 or 10 when the All-Stars come to actually picking their team. I don't see it being 11. Flash, Verney have broken my heart. The two of us are the ones who fought for lads being picked in their positions. Yes, Tony Kelly played corner forward this season for the vast majority of the season. So I don't see how it broken your heart there.
Yeah, first time ever All-Ireland finalist only gets one All-Star, says Michael O'Callaghan. And 14 Munster, 1 Leinster there. Yeah, when you put it that way, you know. Conor Heaney says that Quaid is the best goalkeeper this year.
Conor, come on, that ship has sailed now. That ship sailed about an hour ago. Just like the Liam Cattle ship in Tipperary sailed.
Yeah, that really is quite the news. And I think we're all shell-shocked, or is it just me?
I think we are all shell-shocked, and I don't think I think we'll have to leave this Kilkenny Limerick team for another day while you digest this groundbreaking news, I think.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. We'll do that combined Limerick Kilkenny team probably Monday morning, will we?
Monday morning. Yeah, we'll have a good. You're the paleness may have left your face by then, I'd imagine, and maybe there'll be a replacement in the offing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, just a reminder that please do subscribe to the channel for free on YouTube by clicking the subscribe button. It's in the bottom right corner if you're watching on YouTube. So please do follow us there and on all the social channels. If you want to get the audio podcast, follow us on Patreon. It's $5 a month, patreon.com/OurGame. Really good in terms of building the channel, both of those things. And a reminder, we are brought to you by Bamboo, the hurley from Torpy, which I use myself, which Grode Hegarty found the net with in the All-Ireland final. Michael Verney, on that bombshell, we'll chat to you later.
Thanks, Shane.
The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off.